Honorable Chair and my dear colleagues, good morning to everyone. At the very outset, I would like to acknowledge my debt of gratitude to Robin ma'am and Brent sir for their reviews, comments, which really helped in shaping this paper, my ethnographic profiling of the Anglo-Indian community in Ranchi. So throughout like a period of maybe 6 months or 8 months, the reviews continued and the comments as well. So this is a reflexive exploration of the research which I did 4 years back. I think it was in 2014, 14 or 15. So like it's only a remembering of the research experience and how the problems are almost the same, like the challenges, like sometimes it was very difficult to meet the people, access them. They were all staying in remote areas, visiting them. So the title of my presentation is Researching Community Writing Culture, Challenges and Opportunities. The present paper explores reflexively the experience of researching with the Anglo-Indian community in Ranchi and examines the problems and challenges that arise while researching our community and writing its culture, especially when the researcher is an outsider or a person not belonging to the community. Further, taking ethnography as a rich form of interpretive knowledge production, the paper also documents how a reflexive exploration of the research experience or the retrospective gaze adds to the illuminating insights gained earlier on certain aspects of the Anglo-Indian community in Ranchi and further opens up possibilities of future research in the field of Anglo-Indian studies. Introduction is a very brief, though a considerable amount of time was spent on the research and analysis of the pertinent issues concerning the Anglo-Indians of Ranchi, and Anjali Gira Roy ma'am helped me in articulating the problem of Ranchi and also on the formulation and articulation of the research problem. It constituted the initial phase of my research experience. The present paper focuses mainly on 3 aspects of my research experience, namely approaching the subjects, methods and strategies of data collection, and analysis and interpretation of the data leading to knowledge production. Keeping this categorization in view, I have divided the paper into the following 3 parts, which also form the 3 important phases of my research experience. And the first part is negotiation. In this section, I would focus on the importance of an appropriate link that would serve as an important tool in introducing familiarity and generating intimacy with the subjects, elements which I feel are necessary in conducting research with human subjects. In reflexive ethnography, Charlotte Davies says that in doing research of any kind, there is an implicit assumption that we are investigating something outside ourselves, that the knowledge we seek cannot be gained solely or simply through introspection. We cannot research something with which we have no contact, from which we are completely isolated. Charlotte's assertions make it amply clear that for the initiation of any kind of research, there needs to be a connection or contact between the researcher and the research subjects. Procurement of any kind of contact with my research subjects necessitated a negotiation, a discussion of the ways and means to approach my subjects and obtain their accessibility and consent. In addition, since a grasp of what we seek to understand is always mediated by the positionality of the inquirer, my status as an outsider, as a person not belonging to the Anglo-Indian community, further problematized my ethnographic research. So I was a person not belonging to the community, so I had to face more problems than the problems probably you might have faced in life. It was therefore not surprising for me to experience a rush of anxiety as I turned an ethnographic eye to a community which was not my own. The dearth of information regarding the Ranchi Anglo-Indians on the online forums, which you said that there was no information, I went on searching, like blogs and wikis further enhanced my problem. But as Alan Savonka says, understanding requires analytical movement, not stasis, and it forces the recognition that we only understand from a point of view that reflects our social, cultural, historical, affective location. It was the recognition of these considerations which prompted me to avail the historical, cultural, social, and affective location of my workplace. The institution in which I work, and that is a missionary institution run by the sisters. So they are very well placed and located there. I think the institution was there since 1960s, so they are quite old in Ranchi. I contacted the Reverend Superior of my institution to seek information regarding the Anglo-Indian community in Ranchi, their locales, their professions, and also to inquire about the most appropriate ways of approaching them. So when I went to sister, she said that she had a driver in the institution who was an Anglo-Indian, but the driver might have died and they don't have any connection with the driver. So, but then after that, sister said that you can go to Father Bricious Eka. He's the superior of St. Xavier's School, Ranchi, and father has got Anglo-Indian teachers in the school, and there are also the president of the Anglo-Indian Association is also very close with father. So I approached father. Father was not only in touch with the president of the Anglo-Indian Association, but also had Anglo-Indian teachers in his school. And father was very kind. He really helped me, and he introduced me to the teachers of the school, and he also fixed a meeting with them for my, just to give further information to me regarding the Anglo-Indians. With elements of familiarity being introduced in my relationship with my respondents, my status as the outsider became less problematic, and now gaining accessibility and voluntary consent of the respondents were not challenges for me. My anxiety turned into euphoria at being facilitated by the historical, cultural, social, and affective location of the two educational institutions. My relationship with these two institutions as a teacher. So I work in Nirmala College and I'm a teacher, and my son studies in St. Xavier's School. So both these institutions, they are very close to me. As a teacher and as a mother, had privileged me and provided me with the link to reach my research subjects. And with this, I come to the end of the first section and then started the process of selection. This section shows how the selection of research methodology is guided by what Paul Rock says, the criteria of practicability. In the next phase of my research, I was confronted with the challenge of selecting appropriate research methods and strategies. Being a novice in the field of ethnographic study, I began my research on ethnographic methods. I am from humanities, so it was my first empirical research with the human subjects. I discussed with my colleagues who were experts in the field. I explored the internet and also read literature on research methods to find out what techniques and strategies would suit me best to just fulfill the aims of the research. My explorations revealed that I was not devoid of choice, and I could select from amongst a variety of research techniques and methods like interviews, survey, participant, etc. All those would be a repetition. In the meantime, my meeting with the Anglo-Indian teachers had provided me with the first-hand information regarding the locales, population, as well as the profession of my potential informants. Most of the Anglo-Indian families were located at the outskirts of the city, and conducting research in those locales needed much time, and many of those places were not even known to me. Even though I stay at Ranchi, but those locales are very far, and I took the help of my son, and the elder son, he drove me to all those places, all those lanes, by lanes, for instance, in order to meet the president of the association, I had to go to a long distance. It was really very, and then I had to leave my son alone, the smaller one. He was staying at home. Then that day when I went there, it took me 4 to 5 hours coming back. And then what he had to do, that he had to go to the neighbor's house. All those places, all those problems I had to face. But then, okay. So hence, in addition to the time constraint, there was the pressure of exploring new and unfamiliar locations. Considerations such as these guided my selection of research technique, and I chose the method of interviews for collecting data from the respondents. I selected 11 respondents who belonged to 3 different generations of Anglo-Indians living in Ranchi. The number of respondents was small due to there being a small proportion of the population of Ranchi. So it's a very small, there are only 35 families of Anglo-Indians in Ranchi. So that is the reason why I selected a small number of respondents. Fielding explains the rationale behind selecting a small group of people for conducting research. Ethnography is intense, I quote, lengthy and data rich, and it cannot and probably should not embrace too many people and too wide a field of activity. In a similar manner, Leach speaks of the microscopic investigation of the anthropologist and how anthropological non-random analysis produces results that better explain the cultural and social processes at work. He says, I quote, the anthropologist explicitly concentrates on data which are not random. He purposely chooses a small field within which all observable phenomena are closely interrelated and interdependent. In keeping with Leach's assertions, I also selected my respondents using a non-random sampling method based on their exposure to Ranchi's society and also their experience in the field of education. I adopted purposive sampling to facilitate the study and ensure that all the representative members of the different generations of the Anglo-Indian community in Ranchi were included in the sample. To identify the different generations of the Anglo-Indian community, first, second, and third, I relied on the information given by the respondents who identified the different batches of Anglo-Indians arriving in Ranchi from 1940s onwards. Just drink water. Thank you. I verified and ascertained the authenticity of their data by cross-checking from other sources, such as the principles of the institutions. In retrospect, I feel that this particular research progression was mainly guided by what I said earlier. Paul Rock says, the criteria of practicability. It guided my decisions and choices and even shaped the research process. As Baker says, no matter how carefully one plans in advance, research is designed in the course of its execution. The finished monograph is the result of hundreds of decisions, large and small, made while the research is underway, and our standard texts do not give us procedures and techniques for making these decisions. We can never escape the necessity to improvise. It is possible, after all, to reflect on one's difficulties and inspirations and see how they could be handled more rationally the next time around. A few years later, my reflections on my research experience, few years later means like a few months back while I was writing this research paper, few days back rather. My use of research methods in conducting the research. I realized that though consciously I had used the method of interviews to collect data, but unconsciously I had been gathering material for analysis by observing my respondents in different situations. Because every day I go to the school and I see the Anglo-Indian teachers, even though they are not aware, but I am just, and sometimes I talk to them also in different situations, sometimes as an inconspicuous bystander and sometimes by participating as fully as possible. This observation method facilitated my observation of particular behaviors of my subjects, both in public and private spheres, and thus provided a rich context for understanding my subjects. Now I come to the third and the final section, analysis and interpretation. Interpretation is not limited. This particular section shows that interpretation is not limited to a particular research phase, but takes place even retrospectively, possibly a long time after the research has been completed. Part of the challenge in my research was analyzing, interpreting, and translating the data into theory. As the research process unfolded, new sites were gained, revised, and even reinterpreted. The ultimate goal was to distill from the collected data the core concepts and the issues around which I had to build my theory. The words of my informants and the issues raised by them played a crucial role in shaping my interpretations and even formed an important part of my conclusion. I have mentioned the interviews in conclusion as well, if you remember. So whatever they said, I mentioned those things only. The specificities of their language use, their behavior, their way of interaction, their dialogue delivery, their performance of rituals provided illuminating insights regarding their identity and culture. I came to the conclusion that for the members, these were my findings. I came to the conclusion that for the members of the Anglo-Indian community in Ranchi, it was the performance of and a strict adherence to the rites and rituals associated with Christianity which constituted their identity as an Anglo-Indian. But as Brian Roberts says, interpretation is not limited to a particular research phase, but takes place before, during and after the gathering of materials, and even retrospectively, possibly a long time after the research has been completed. The process of interpretation can be a long-lasting one, including the remembrance of research. The retrospective gaze, perhaps some years later, may not only lead to a reliving of earlier emotions felt during the investigation, but may also give a new perspective to the original research. So my finding after 4 years, what I read right now was the finding which I had in 2014 or maybe 15. A reliving of my past research experience allowed me an enhanced clarity of vision. I was able to perceive things which I had missed earlier. I could see clearly the things which had enabled my subjects to maintain a distinct Anglo-Indian identity and also given a uniqueness to their culture. And then I just remember now that Brent asked me how you are able to say that it's because other Christians are also there, they are also following the rites and rituals of Christianity. How you can say that there are unique Anglo-Indianness, how does it come? So it is now when I reflected and my investigations continued, I continued to ask my colleagues, they were tribal Christians and the people over there. It was the purity in their performance of rites and rituals associated with Christianity. Despite their hybrid existence, their ability to adjust, their integration in the mainstream society, it is the purity in the performance of their rites and rituals which has enabled them to preserve and maintain their distinctive Anglo-Indian identity and culture. The Anglo-Indians of Franchi have not succumbed to the influences of the dominating culture as far as their religion is concerned. Their religious practices, customs, and performances remain pure, untainted, and free from any external influence, any binarism or duality which creates for them a unity of experience or oneness of feeling and forms the basis of their Anglo-Indian culture. I reached this conclusion only after I had compared them with the other Christian communities of Franchi. So I asked my colleagues, like in marriages are performed in the churches, okay, but then when after the marriages they come back home, again it is performed according to the tribal rites. This is what they told me. Okay, so like, and then again they told me that there are Bethia Christians, several communities of Christians, tribal Christians. Bethia Christians said that marriages are performed in the churches, right, according to the Christian rites and rituals. But when they come back home, it is being performed according to the Bihari, that system. They have the same, all those. So there are two different things. The duality is there. So I reached this conclusion only after I had compared them with the other Christian communities of Franchi. I came to know and I even observed that the rites, rituals and customs of the other Christian communities of Franchi had been influenced by those of the dominating culture. So like instances of tribal Christians and like they had the marriages and all those things. I'm not citing over here because of the paucity of time. In conclusion, it can be said that a good research is a thinking person's game. It is a creative and a strategic process that involves constant assessment, reassessment to grasp the subject's point of view and draw authentic conclusions regarding their lives and culture. And these conclusions further represent points of departure, pathways toward possibilities of future research in the field of Anglo-Indian studies. Thank you.